I flip it, I got a tail. I flip it, I got a head. I got two heads, a tail, and a head. But if I flipped it, you'll probably say, well, yeah, you're going to get so many heads, maybe two tails, and a tail and a head. And you see, it's like that. Probability, it'll go that way. But if I flipped it today, and I got 20 heads in a row, you'd all be scratching your heads all of a sudden, like, well, how did you get 20 heads in this row? Because flipping a coin and getting 20 heads is rather unusual. The probabilities of that happening are very, 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 very high. So, if I was to flip this and get 20 heads in a row, you'd probably start giving it, you'd probably say, well, maybe it's a special coin. The coin's been sort of made so that when you flip it, it's so heavy on one side that the heavy side, the slightly heavier side, always ends up for it landing on that way, so it's always heads up. So maybe it's not a normal coin, it's a trick coin. It's been designed that way. And you'd probably rationalize it's something like that. And that would probably be a good guess. So, probability-wise, you would say that would be a probable answer for it. But if you live in a place like our universe where things are really, really good and right for life to exist, complex life, from simple things, complexity arises. Not just complex things like atoms becoming molecules and molecules becoming organic molecules, let's say, from that path, to becoming structured, to becoming living things, etc., self-replicating. They can make themselves again. They can reproduce themselves like living things do. If that's the case, then the answer then given by people who might say, well, I don't think that there's some type of intelligence behind it. I think it's just chance. It's like flipping the coin that way. It's just chance. And so the answer for that is, well, maybe there are an infinite number of universes. And if there are an infinite number of universes, then of course there must be one like ours. If you flip it enough universes, then you get one like ours if you have an infinite number. And so that is one of the answers, like this man right here, or Richard Dawkins would say, well, the reason why our universe is so good for life and why things are so ordered and structured is because, well, there are lots of them. You've all watched shows like, I don't know, what was the show, about, a parallel universe stories. I don't know if you watched, there was a TV show on about a parallel universe, Fringe, for example, and there was a parallel universe. But right now there's a parallel universe. There's another you out there. And another you is maybe a Christian. And there's another universe where you are a Hindu. And there's another universe where you are a Buddhist. And there's another universe where you don't even exist that way because you weren't even born. And that's the probability. You can exist in all those ways. And so one thing that our scientists, physicists, quantum physicists are saying, maybe there are multiple universes, parallel universes, and that explains why our universe is just right the way it is and it has certain laws, because statistically, there must be one like ours, and since we're in it, that explains it, and go home and have a cup of tea. That explains it away. The only problem with that theory, it's not even a theory. It's a nice idea. And this is one of the big problems of multiple universes, if you hear that argument from someone, is this. What proof? Okay, you say I have a hard time proving God. Prove to me there's another universe. How could you prove that? How could you prove it? And there's no way to prove it. You can postulate it mathematically. For example, recently you heard of the God particle, the Higgs boson?
Yes.
And what's a Higgs boson? It's a particle that exists in a Higgs field, and as other particles move through that Higgs field, their velocities change, and that change of velocity traveling through a Higgs field is what produces mass. That's why an electron weighs this much, and a quark weighs that much, and a boson weighs that much, or nothing at all. It's its relationship to the Higgs field. And it was a theory. And so they went to the big collider in CERN in France, and they shot these particles, trillions of them, and got bits of data, trillions of bits of data, put them on supercomputers to try to find some evidence that there was this thing that would come out that they postulated, a particle called a Higgs boson. The particle that gives things their mass. We know that things have mass, but we measure it. We use scales to measure the mass of them. We call that measuring it, how much does it weigh, the grams of it, or the kilograms. We know things have mass. But what gives things their mass? We didn't know. They postulated this particle. And they found out, hey, yeah, finally, that we finally got enough data that seems to indicate, yeah, there really is a Higgs boson. And so last year, there was a big brouhaha in Switzerland, in France, and they came out in June of last year saying, we're pretty much sure that we've discovered the Higgs boson, finally. The mathematics was sound, here it is. Okay, maybe they proved it. That's good for us. But at the end of the day, how then, though, do you prove that there's another universe out there? And the answer is, you can't prove it. There's no way you can prove it. Our math and our science, as far as we understand, you can never prove it. Even if you have it as a good mathematical model, you cannot prove that. And that's it. But many people say, well, we need to have that multiple universe theory in order to explain the fine-tuning, the regularity, the structure of our universe, which we do know exists. So if someone argues that case, then I would say then to that person, well, it's a nice, interesting idea, but it's just an idea. And if you think, and if my belief in God, for me, is a nice idea, and I may not be able to prove it spot on, you certainly cannot prove that there's another universe out there. And until you can prove it, your belief in that is just a belief. No more than my belief in God to you is just a conviction and a belief. So that's one thing you should keep in mind, because that's an argument that many people who deny God will argue today, this idea of a multiverse. Or that we exist in one giant universe, and we're some little neighborhood in that universe. And maybe beyond where we can see very far away where we don't have any information from that because we can't observe it. There's another space of our universe where the physical laws are slightly different. And so there's another pocket where maybe the gravitational constant is slightly different. It has different physics there. And then near it, but not touching it, is another corner of the universe. And that place has its special physics. And that maybe it exists. But since we can't go there, or we can't detect it, we don't know it exists, so it's another maybe theory. Another thing to try to explain in the universe how it is how do you explain living things in the universe? What is it that makes something alive? What makes something alive in the universe? Well, you say, well, okay, and give an example to understand how to explain life is very complicated. It's a very simple experiment you have to do. All you have to do is get one cell, take a cell, which has its nucleus, and then outside the nucleus, let's say it's a eukaryotic cell, it has a nucleus, and it has all the cellular structures in it, the organelles, etc. And then you break the cell membrane. You break that cell membrane. It's just usually a few molecules thick. A lipid layer. It's showing a lipid layer, right? You got some protein structures that create some little gateways. And that's basically what a cell membrane is. Remove the cell membrane and take those things. Don't mess it up now. And put that cell without the cell membrane. Put it in a solution. Put it in an amount of water. Will it reconstitute itself as a living thing? And the answer is no, it won't. What you get is just a mass of all the things that make up the cell, but it won't be alive anymore. Why doesn't it? Why doesn't a cell do that? If it was just the physics and the chemistry, or the chemistry resulting from the relationship of atoms, if that's all it was, why can't they still maintain that type of structure that we would call, and relationship we call, a living cell? It doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way. Why doesn't it happen that way? We don't know why it doesn't happen that way. So even when it comes to trying to define what life is, it's a very difficult thing. So when you think about that, when you think about living things, they're very complex. They're agents. They do things on their own. For example, if I was to take this microphone right now, and I was to just apply basic Newtonian physics, and I was to understand if I applied so much force and this weighs so much, it weighed, let's say, 1 kilogram. I applied so much force at a certain angular trajectory, I could hit that light back there. You can pretty much predict I'm going to hit that lamp back there. I can apply the physics to that, right? Now, if I take a honeybee, a living honeybee, I take a dead honeybee, and I sort of reduce friction on my honeybee, I can throw my honeybee, my dead one, and I could probably maybe hit her. Because I wouldn't want to do that, because maybe you don't like bees. I can hit you with this easy, right? Bam. I could try that. I could take a dead honeybee, which is this is not alive. I can take a dead honeybee, which was alive, and throw it at you, and probably hit you with a dead honeybee. But if I was to take that living honeybee, and just throw it enough, or to let it go, can I guarantee from Newtonian physics that that honeybee is going to reach its or not? No. Because there's one thing that honeybee has. It has individual autonomy as a living organism. It's an agent of itself. It can determine where it wants to go. Even though all it is a bunch of carbon and nitrogen and potassium like me. But as a living thing, it's an individual autonomous agent. It can do what it wants. How it makes those choices, I don't know. I'm not a honeybee. But definitely honeybees are like that. So that's the difference between a non-living thing and a living thing. Living things are agents, and they do things unpredictably generally, in many ways, on many levels. Yeah, you can predict whether or not, right now, for example, we know, for example, that those 17-year-old cicadas are coming out in North Carolina and Georgia and Virginia, and every 17 years they go through a process from laying the egg and 17 years of being a nymph underground, and after 17 years of feeding off the tree roots, you can predict in the next, so what's 17 years from 2013 is what? So in 2030, you can predict the life cycle of that insect. In 2013, unless something happens to them, you will have another mass emergence of the 17-year cicada in North Carolina in a certain location. You can predict that, but you cannot predict everything about every individual cicada as a living organism. Because that's something about living things. They do not confine themselves to just mere physics and chemistry. Their living nature gives them a quality of autonomy and self-agency about themselves. Another thing is, unlike this is not a goal-oriented object. This thing doesn't seek anything beyond, it's just there. There it is, right there. It doesn't seek anything. But if I was to place, and you can do this, you can plant a sunflower. How many of you guys have planted sunflowers before? What do sunflowers do during the day? It's called phototropism. What is it? What is phototropism? They move and follow the light. So, in the springtime in Houston, you see these yellow flowers blooming everywhere. That looks like a little aster. If you watch them all in the morning in a field, they're all facing the sun. All the flowers are facing the sun. And you come at noon, the whole field of flowers is facing the sun. And at Maghrib time, the whole field of flowers is facing the sun. It's really cool. Why do they do that? Why do the plants turn that way? That's a quality of living things. They have this quality of purpose. Of course, you say the plant is turned towards the sun to maximize its ability to receive light. So it makes sure that all its leaves are maximally exposed towards the sun to maximize its capacity to collect light. But that's a purpose. That's very purposeful. So we can see living things, they have purposeful activity. That makes them unique, unlike this. Now this has a purpose to it. But if it was just a glob of metal, iron, it's not purposeful. Okay, you guys have questions? And another thing about living things is that it's a thing where they have two aspects to them. On one level, living things function with the basic physics and chemistry you can describe in your Chemistry 101 and Physics 101 class. They can be described that way. But on another level, they describe, they're on a different level. They're on the level of information, encoded information. Like DNA. DNA is, maybe has 3 billion sequences in DNA. No, maybe has 3 million? 3 million sequences in DNA. Of, of the nucleic acids, these 4 nucleic acids in sequences. And those sequences, how they are giving, there's inherent information. Each nucleic acid does not have the information. 2 of them together do not give you the sequence. You need at least 3 to give you to code for an amino acid. And you need 3 more to code for an amino acid. And then you get those amino acids coming together to form a protein. And then proteins become the basic workhorses of any living system. The other things that do all the work are basically all the proteins. But they're encoded by the sequence of the nucleic acid sequences in a DNA strand. And that's information there. How did that information get there? Well, it could be random, it may not be random. And that's a question we ask ourselves. How do living things have encoded within themselves complex levels of coding, which also give us information? How did that information get there? Of course, an evolutionist, a person might say, well, if you give enough time, and it may just happen randomly. But the thing is, on this planet, life was around for about 2 billion years, almost 3 billion years, as far as we can tell geologically. And then about 20 million years ago, simple life forms began, just as we call the Cambrian explosion. Complex life seems to originate with great complexity. Why did it take 3 billion years for that to happen? Couldn't it have happened 1 billion years ago, or could it have happened 2 billion years ago? What took so long for it to happen? We don't know. But the one thing about